They stole my $500,000 inheritance, my own parents, and then called me ungrateful when I asked for the truth. I'm Maren Ellison, and I spent years being the quiet daughter, the peacekeeper. But when I found out what they'd done behind my back, something in me broke. I didn't just ask for justice, I demanded it. Stay with me until the end. Then tell me, was I wrong to stand up to them? Would you have done the same? I really want to know. I remember the exact moment it all began, sitting at Blue Wren Cafe, stirring my lukewarm coffee, wondering why my mother hadn't called me back in 3 days. If only I had known what that silence was hiding. It was a Monday morning in early March, gray outside like most days in Portland. I had my usual seat by the window, a notebook open in front of me with my grocery budget scribbled out in blue ink. There was a half-eaten lemon muffin on the plate. Nothing felt unusual, except the silence. My mom always called on Sundays. Just a little check-in, sometimes more guilt-ridden than caring, but it was our routine. I had texted her. Twice. The first got no reply. The second just said, "We'll talk soon." And now I was staring at that unread message while the steam from my coffee faded into nothing. That's when I noticed the email. It had slipped into the promotions tab of my inbox, which I almost never checked. The subject line was short, activity alert, closed account. The sender? Kester Bank, the same place my grandfather had held his accounts for decades. My stomach tightened before I even clicked it. Inside, it read, "This is a notice confirming the closure of account ending in 1297. Final transaction recorded 10 months ago. For questions, please contact customer service." I blinked. That was the account, my account. The one Papa Walt had left me in his will. $500,000, specifically designated in his handwritten testament, to Maren Ellison for her stability and independence. We'd gone over it with his lawyer. After the funeral, my parents had said they'd help manage it temporarily, while I focused on settling the estate. I never questioned it. That was my first mistake. At first, I thought it was an error. Maybe the wrong account. Maybe something simple. But my fingers were already dialing my mother's number, and I felt the dread blooming behind my ribcage. She picked up on the third ring. "Oh, Maren," she said, in that breezy, distracted voice she used when she didn't want to deal with something. "Everything okay?" "I just got an email about the Kester account," I said. "It says it was closed 10 months ago." Silence. Not long, but long enough. "Really?" she finally said. "That's strange. Are you sure it wasn't just a notice for interest changes or something?" It said closed. Completely. Final transaction 10 months ago. Another pause. I could hear her exhale, slow and deliberate. "Maren," she said, "have you ever considered that maybe that money wasn't meant to be a burden for you alone?" I stared at the phone like I'd misheard her. "What?" She softened her tone. "It's just that your father and I, well, we've been through a lot this past year. The shop didn't survive COVID, and we had so many expenses when your grandfather passed. He always wanted what's best for the family. All of us." That's when something shifted. A tiny crack in the concrete wall of trust I'd spent 38 years maintaining. It didn't collapse, not yet, but I could feel it starting to give. "I thought it was in my name," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "He left it to me. In the will." "Oh, honey, don't be so legalistic about it. What's ours is yours, and what's yours, well, it's all family, isn't it?" I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. And she didn't say goodbye. She just hung up. I sat there for a long time, watching the people come and go from the cafe, like I wasn't even in my own body. A young couple sat near me, laughing over a shared croissant. A man with silver hair opened his laptop and started typing furiously. The world kept spinning, but my mind was stuck on that sentence. "What's yours is all family." It sounded harmless, almost sweet. But I knew what she meant. I knew exactly what she meant. That afternoon, I walked home with my keys clenched so tight in my fist that the metal left little red marks in my palm. Not because I was angry, not yet, but because I didn't know where this was going, and that scared me more than anything. I didn't know it then, but that email would become the thread I'd pull until the whole thing unraveled. It was strange how quickly I started questioning everything. After that phone call with my mother, I couldn't sleep the same. I'd lie there in bed, watching the soft orange streetlight bleed through my curtains, wondering how long they'd been planning whatever it was they had done. Or worse, if they'd even thought twice about it. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Not right away. I told myself I was just waiting to gather more information, but deep down, I think I was afraid of what it would mean if someone else saw it clearly. If they confirmed that what I was feeling wasn't just paranoia. A week later, I drove out to their house. It still looked the same. Weathered porch steps, Mom's potted succulents lined up in uneven rows, the faded welcome mat with a cracked sunflower design. I used to love this house. I used to think it meant safety. Dad opened the door. He didn't smile. "Oh," he said, blinking like I'd shown up unannounced, which, technically, I had. "What brings you by?" "I just needed to ask about the Kester account," I said. "The one Papa left me." He stepped aside, not quite making eye contact. "Your mother's out back. You want some tea?" I shook my head. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and rosemary. Too clean. I walked to the kitchen, where he leaned against the counter, arms crossed like I was some teenager about to be lectured. "I got an email saying the account was closed almost a year ago," I said. "I thought you were helping me manage it." He raised an eyebrow. "We were." "It's all a bit more complicated than that, Maren." "Why didn't anyone tell me it was closed?" He let out a breath like I was exhausting him. "Con nên tin ba mi chu," he said, slipping into the Vietnamese phrase he'd sometimes use when he wanted to make a point I wouldn't argue with. "You should trust your parents. Don't let a few numbers ruin your view of family." I just stood there. I wasn't angry, not yet. I felt small. Like he'd shrunk the issue down to something I should feel ashamed for bringing up. "I'm not talking about a few numbers," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I'm talking about a trust account with my name on it." He didn't respond. Just picked up his coffee mug and walked out of the kitchen, like the conversation was over. And maybe it was for him. I left a few minutes later, hands shaking as I fumbled my keys. Later that afternoon, I went back to Blue Wren. I didn't plan to go there. It was just muscle memory, I guess. The kind of place I always ended up when I needed to think. The cafe was half full, soft acoustic music playing in the background, and the air smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. I ordered a cappuccino and sat down, trying to focus on my notebook. But I didn't even get the lid off my pen before someone walked past and bumped into my table, sloshing my coffee just enough to stain the corner of the page. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," the woman said. She looked to be in her 40s, short auburn hair tucked under a knitted beanie, eyes warm and slightly embarrassed. "It's okay," I said quickly, grabbing a napkin. She sat at the table next to mine and, after a few moments, turned back to me. "You looked like you were solving the universe with that pen." I didn't mean to interrupt. I smiled faintly, just trying to make sense of something. "Family stuff?" she asked gently. I blinked. "Yeah, actually." She nodded, as if she'd already known. "I'm April," she said. "April Sloan. I run the bookstore 2 blocks over." I introduced myself, and, to my surprise, we started talking. Not in the polite, surface-level way you do with strangers at cafes, but in the way you talk when someone's voice feels oddly familiar. She shared that she'd gone through a nasty custody battle years ago, after her husband passed, and his family tried to claim she was too unstable to raise their son alone. "They called me a grieving liability," she said, sipping her tea. "But I think they were just scared that I wouldn't need them." I asked her how she got through it. "I started listening to myself," she said. "Stopped listening to people who only wanted me quiet. That hit me somewhere I didn't expect." She didn't press. She didn't offer advice. Just let it sit. Before leaving, I scribbled down the number for Kester Bank's customer service. That night, alone in my apartment, I called them. I gave them my information, waded through the hold music, tapped my foot a little too fast. "Yes, ma'am," the agent said. The account ending in 1297 was transferred to an entity named Finch Heritage Holdings, LLC, back in May of last year. I blinked. "I've never heard of that company." "It's registered in Portland," he added. Looks like it's affiliated with Golden Finch Antiques. My parents' old shop. My hands went cold. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. They hadn't been managing anything. They'd moved the money, without telling me, under a name that looked nice enough, but meant they could do whatever they wanted with what was legally mine. I sat in the silence of my living room, staring at the sticky note where I'd written down the name of that LLC. It looked harmless, just ink on paper, but it felt like betrayal. And I finally let myself call it that. I didn't sleep much after that call with the bank. I couldn't stop replaying the details: Finch Heritage Holdings, the connection to my parents' antique shop, the quiet efficiency with which it had all been moved without a word to me. It didn't feel like a misunderstanding anymore. It felt like something far more deliberate. By the next morning, I had printed every statement, every record I could access. I highlighted dates, circled names. My fingers trembled as I packed everything into a folder. I wasn't just going to ask this time, I was going to show them. Their house looked the same as always. Fresh mulch in the flower beds, a ceramic wind chime on the porch, humming with the wind. It was the kind of place that whispered, "Nothing bad happens here." That made it worse. My mother opened the door. She wore her usual soft pink sweater and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Maren," she said, her voice light but cautious. "This is a surprise." "I need to talk," I said, holding up the folder. Her smile faltered, but she stepped aside. "Of course." We sat in the living room, sunlight spilling across the beige carpet. My father wasn't home. Off playing cards, probably. I didn't waste time. "I called Kester Bank," I said. "The account Papa left me? It was emptied last May. Transferred to Finch Heritage Holdings." Her eyes flickered. I pulled out a paper. "This is the confirmation. I also found that the company is tied to your old business." She didn't speak. Not at first. Then she reached for the folder, gently, like she might soothe the truth out of it. "I didn't think they'd notify you," she said softly. My heart clenched. "So it's true?" She set the folder down and exhaled, long and slow, then looked straight at me. "Maren, we didn't take it to hurt you. We needed it. After the shop failed, and with your father's health, we were drowning." "You didn't ask," I said. My voice wasn't angry, just tired. "You told me you were managing it, because we knew you'd say no." I stood there, trying to hold myself together while every memory of Sunday dinners, holiday traditions, the times I'd driven them to doctor's appointments, all of it cracked under the weight of that sentence. "I would have helped," I said quietly. "But that wasn't help. That was theft." Her voice rose then, not loud but sharp. "We're your parents. We gave up everything to raise you. Your grandfather would have wanted us all taken care of."
"No."
"He wanted me to be independent. He wrote that in his will." She stood, backing away like I'd said something profane. "You really think it was just for you? After everything we did?" That's when the tears started. Hers first. "We had nothing when he died," she sobbed, gripping the edge of the chair like it was the only thing keeping her up. "You think we live in luxury? You think this house runs on air? That account saved us." I didn't cry. I just felt empty, like I'd been gutted, and now I was just standing in my own skin with nothing left to anchor me. She looked at me again, voice trembling. "Are you going to sue your own family?" I didn't answer. When I left, I didn't slam the door. I didn't even raise my voice. I walked to my car, folder still in hand, heart pounding in my ears. That night, everything exploded. I woke up to a group message. My mom had texted every relative in our family thread. "Maren's threatening to sue us over the inheritance. We raised her better than this. Please pray for our family during this painful time." By noon, my phone was full of notifications. "Is it true? Why would you do this to them? I knew you were always cold. But this? You were his favorite, and this is how you repay your parents?" I turned off my phone. I sat on the floor in my apartment, back against the kitchen cabinet, knees pulled to my chest.
And I cried. Hard.
The kind of cry that doesn't make sound, just shakes you from the inside out. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about betrayal. It was about losing the one thing I thought I still had, some version of family. And in that moment, surrounded by silence and the hum of my refrigerator, I realized something. They didn't just take the money. They took the legacy. They took the version of me who still believed I mattered to them beyond what I could give. And now, I didn't know who I was without that version. But maybe it was time to find out. I hadn't been back to Grandpa Walt's place since the funeral. It sat just outside town, on a quiet street lined with birch trees and houses that hadn't changed much since the 70s. The windows still had those old floral curtains Grandma made, and the porch creaked like it always did when you stepped on the third board from the left. The house smelled like cedar and dust, like time had paused the moment he died. I came to pick up a few things, mostly sentimental stuff no one else had wanted. Mom had told me to just grab whatever felt meaningful, though I now saw that meant whatever's left. I moved through the living room slowly, not looking for anything in particular. But when I opened the bottom drawer of his old writing desk, tucked beneath a stack of tax forms and faded utility bills, I found it. A plain white envelope with my name written in his careful, slanted script. On the front he'd written, "In case I'm not here when it matters." My fingers hesitated over the flap. It felt like opening a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. But I did. Inside was a folded letter and a copy of the original will, the one I'd seen months ago with the lawyer after the service. But taped to the will was something I hadn't seen before, a handwritten note. "Maren, if you're reading this, they've done what I feared. You always saw too much but said too little. I know that quiet strength runs deep in you, but please don't let them erase what I meant for you. This isn't just money, it's freedom. Use it to build a life that's yours, not theirs. Love you always, Papa." I didn't cry right away. I just sat down on the floor, back against the bookshelf, letter resting on my knees. My heart felt like it had split clean in half, one side aching with grief, the other with the sharp clarity of betrayal. He knew. Somehow he had seen this coming. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Like the girl who always nodded, who always backed down, was finally too tired to keep doing it. The next day, I walked into the office of Rudy Cates, Grandpa's old attorney. He hadn't changed much, same mustache, same quiet kindness. He looked surprised to see me. "Maren," he said, standing from behind his desk. "What brings you in?" I handed him the envelope and sat down. "I think I need help." He read everything slowly, carefully, then set the papers down. "I remember your grandfather insisting this be notarized separately," Rudy said. "He was clear about his wishes. It was meant for you alone." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "But they took it. They moved it. And they're acting like I'm the selfish one for even asking." Rudy leaned back in his chair. "Legally, they have no claim to it. Not unless you gave them power of attorney, which you didn't. So, I could fight this." "Yes," he said. "You absolutely could. But it's my parents," I whispered. He didn't rush to answer. Just looked at me for a moment, then said quietly, "Sometimes, the hardest fights aren't about what we stand to gain, but what we're finally willing to stop losing." I sat there, letting that sink in. I'd spent my whole life being the peacekeeper. The one who didn't raise her voice. The one who went home on holidays even when I felt like a guest in my own family. The one who gave and gave and gave. And now, I was being asked to decide if I was willing to fight for myself. The idea of going to court against my own parents made me nauseous. Not because I thought I'd lose, but because I knew what they'd say, what they'd turn it into. The daughter who sues her aging parents. The ungrateful girl who took and then demanded more. But they were the ones who crossed the line. They'd made the choice to take something that wasn't theirs, and worse, they made me feel like I was wrong for noticing. As I walked out of Rudy's office, the air felt different, like it had weighed again. In the parking lot, I paused beside my car and looked up at the sky. It was overcast, just like the day at the cafe when it all started. But this time, I wasn't waiting for answers to fall into my lap. I had the truth. I had his words. And now I had a choice. Maybe the family I thought I was protecting had already broken itself. Maybe it was finally time to protect myself. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you start doubting everything you thought was safe. It's not just physical. It's not just mental. It's spiritual, like some part of your soul is standing outside your body, watching you unravel one thread at a time. For 2 weeks, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, phone clutched in my hand, scrolling back through old texts from my mom. Some were sweet. Most weren't. They had the tone of someone constantly disappointed, but never quite willing to say it out loud. You've always been the strong one, Maren. I just hope you don't forget where you came from. You're the one we count on to understand. Over the years, I'd collected these messages like someone keeps pressed flowers, quiet reminders of a time when I thought love and guilt were the same thing. I started remembering things I hadn't let myself feel in years. Like how, growing up, my sister Mallory got to be the one who cried, who slammed doors, who said what she wanted. I was the fixer. The calm one. The one who covered for everyone else's mess because that's what good daughters did. But lately, the role felt less like virtue and more like silence weaponized against me. I barely ate. I'd look at food and feel sick. I lost 7 pounds without trying, and my jeans hung a little looser than usual. When April saw me at the cafe one morning, she didn't even say hello at first. She just sat down across from me and stared. "You look like a ghost," she said, hands wrapped around her tea. "I'm fine," I mumbled.
She didn't buy it.
"No, you're not. And you don't have to be." I looked away. The street outside was wet with rain. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, laughing. I remembered laughing once. I just couldn't remember when. "They're calling me cold," I whispered. "Ungrateful. Heartless." April leaned forward. "Maren, if someone stole from you, lied to you, and then called you heartless, would you still call that love?" Her words hit like a match against dry leaves. Because no, I wouldn't. Later that day, I got a call from Rudy. His voice was calm, measured, like always. But what he told me made my stomach twist into knots. "I've been doing a bit of digging," he said. "I wanted to make sure the inheritance wasn't already depleted. But it's worse than I thought." I said nothing. I was bracing for it. "Your parents transferred the funds into a separate investment account, one that isn't under their name anymore. It's now part of a property trust managed by an entity based in Nevada." I blinked. Nevada? They're trying to move it fast. I believe the intent is to liquidate and reassign assets before anything can be frozen. My hands went cold. So, if I don't act now, they could move it completely out of reach. If we wait even a few weeks, it might be too late. I stared at my kitchen table, where the envelope from Grandpa still sat. I hadn't been able to put it away. I kept touching the paper, like it could give me courage. I'd been hoping, deep down, that maybe they'd change course. That maybe, given time, they'd see what they'd done. Maybe they'd apologize. But that wasn't going to happen. They weren't just holding on to the money. They were hiding it, disguising it, preparing to wash their hands of it completely.
Of me.
This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intent. And the thing about intent is it changes everything. I hung up with Rudy and just sat there for a while, staring at the kitchen wall like it might open up and offer me another option. But there wasn't one.
It was simple now.
Either I stood up for myself, or I let them erase me from the story completely. So I opened my laptop. And I sent Rudy one line. "Move forward. Whatever it takes." It didn't feel brave. It didn't feel victorious. It just felt necessary. Like breathing after holding your lungs still too long. Later that night, I stood on my balcony, Portland's chill damp air brushing against my skin, and whispered something into the wind. I am not the villain in their story. I'm just finally telling mine. There's something hauntingly quiet about making a decision that redraws the lines of your life. There was no dramatic music, no flash of revelation. Just a pen, a thick manila envelope, and the soft sound of my name scrawled across a legal page. I signed the lawsuit papers on a Thursday morning at Rudy's office. His conference room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper, and the blinds were halfway closed, filtering in a narrow slice of spring sun. "This is just the beginning," Rudy said, his voice low, even and steady. You understand that once this is filed, there's no going back. I nodded. My hand hovered for a moment before I pressed the pen down. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel angry. I felt hollow. Like I had just given myself permission to walk away from the people who taught me to never walk away. By the time I drove home, the first call had already come in. It was my mother. Her voice broke before I even said hello. You're really doing this? She asked, her tone more wounded than shocked. Like I'd just confessed to abandoning her on the side of a road. I'm standing up for myself, I said quietly. This isn't standing up. This is betrayal. You're tearing your family apart. Then came the click. No goodbye. Just the familiar silence of someone who had decided they'd said enough. By sunset, my phone showed 13 missed calls. Some hung up after one ring. Others left voicemails, disjointed, tear-filled, accusatory, desperate. By the third day, I stopped picking up altogether. My mother tried every angle. Some calls began with weeping. I don't know who you are anymore, Maren, and ended with threats. You'll regret this when we're dead, and it's too late to fix it. The tone shifted like a wheel. Grief, guilt, fury, sweetness. I remember one voicemail where she tried to sound calm, like we were just two women discussing dinner plans. I just want to talk, honey. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no drama. Let's fix this. But it wasn't mine to fix anymore. It never had been. I stopped checking the messages after the 100th call. I'd scroll past the red notification dots without even reading them. I knew what they'd say. And more than that, I knew what they meant. They weren't asking me to come back. They were demanding I return to who I used to be. The daughter who nodded and absorbed the damage. The daughter who never said no. Call number 173 came at 11:37 p.m. on a Sunday night. I was in bed, lights off, listening to the rain tap against the window in soft rhythms. The phone lit up my nightstand like a lighthouse beacon in a storm. I stared at the screen.
Mom.
I didn't move. I placed the phone face down and rolled onto my side. For the first time in my life, I chose silence, not to keep the peace, but to protect my own. That moment didn't feel like a victory. It felt like letting go of a lifeline that had always been made of threadbare rope. A few days later, Rudy called to confirm the mediation meeting. It wouldn't be a trial, yet. Just a closed session.
Structured.
Civil, no interruptions. Just words and consequences. April offered to come with me. She even offered to sit in the waiting room with tea. But I said no. I need to do this alone, I told her. If I don't walk in by myself, I'll always wonder if I could've. The building was a generic office plaza on the west side of town. Cream brick. Short hedges. Birds chirping as if nothing life-changing was happening behind those doors. My parents were already inside. My mother wore that navy dress she always pulled out for weddings, funerals, and jury duty. Dad stood by the window, hands behind his back, lips drawn in a tight line. When I entered, my father's eyes locked on mine. He didn't greet me. I sat next to Rudy, who gave me a silent nod of support. The mediator, a middle-aged man with a gentle voice, began the session, laying out the process and terms. No one said anything. Then, Dad stood up. He slammed his hand on the table, hard enough to rattle the water glasses. We raised her for 38 years, he barked. We put food in her mouth, clothes on her back, and now she drags us into a courtroom like we're thieves? The mediator tried to speak, but he waved him off. This is what we get. After everything we've done? I sat still. And then I spoke. Calmly. Clearly. This isn't about money. It's about trust. And you broke it. For a moment, no one breathed. Dad's shoulders dropped, just slightly. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but her face stayed dry. The tears never came. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Talk of escrow accounts, restitution timelines, pending hearings. But none of it meant more than that single moment. Because I had finally said the thing I'd swallowed for decades. After we stepped outside, Rudy rested a hand on my shoulder. You did good, he said. I nodded. The Portland sky above us was overcast, heavy with the kind of stillness that comes before rain. It matched the way I felt, exhausted, quiet, but whole. There would be fallout. More messages. More whispers from people who didn't know half the story. But I'd made my choice. And this time, I wasn't apologizing for it. They didn't waste time. 1 week after mediation, my cousin Megan texted me a screenshot with no message attached. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Just seeing my mother's name at the top of the Facebook post made my stomach tighten. The post read like a eulogy. "We are devastated. Our own daughter has dragged us into court over money she never needed. We raised her with love, gave her everything we had, and now we are being punished for it. This isn't about justice. This is about greed. Pray for our family." Dozens of comments followed. Some were polite condolences, sending love and strength, the usual script. Others, though, cut like glass. People I hadn't heard from since I was a teenager, people who barely knew me, weighing in with such certainty. She always seemed cold. Honestly, not surprised. She was never really warm to anyone. I knew something was off about her. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop, heart thudding in my chest like a warning drum. My tea had gone cold beside me. The cursor blinked on an empty document I'd meant to be working on, but my thoughts had been hijacked. Within an hour, the direct messages started. Emails, Instagram DMs, even a few voicemails from second cousins asking if I could find it in my heart to back down. Most weren't even angry, just dripping in that passive, weaponized concern. "I just hope you understand how much this is breaking your mom. Isn't family worth more than money? She's not perfect, but she's your mother." And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I saw it, the photo. A cropped, low-resolution scan of Grandpa's will. My name blurred out, parts taped over. The caption, "Just so the truth is out there." They were rewriting history one post at a time, recasting themselves as the victims and me as the vulture. The ungrateful daughter who had turned on her aging parents over a few dollars. But it wasn't the lies that broke me. It was the familiarity of it. The way they told the story so confidently, so easily, while I was the one sitting alone in a quiet apartment, trying to breathe through the weight of being misunderstood. Again, I could have stayed silent. I'd done it all my life. When Mallory took credit for my ideas. When Mom made backhanded comments in front of guests. When Dad reminded me year after year that they were keeping score. But something snapped. Not out of fury. Not to argue. Just clarity. I realized there were women like me, scrolling past posts like those, wondering if standing up for themselves meant losing everything. I realized that maybe they needed to know they weren't alone. So I logged into the Facebook account I barely touched and typed a single sentence. I kept quiet for decades, because I thought silence was love. I was wrong. No tags. No hashtags. No names. Just the truth. I almost didn't hit post. But I did. At first, there was nothing. No likes. No comments. Just a little dot showing it had been published. But then, slowly, responses started to appear. I needed this today. My dad did the same when my grandmother died. I thought I was the only one who felt this kind of betrayal. Thank you. And then a message from someone I never expected, Lynn. My cousin Lynn and I were never close. She was always quiet at family functions, disappearing after dinner, never staying long enough to make conversation. I'd assumed she just didn't like me. Now I saw something else. Her message said, "They did the same to my mom after Grandpa passed. Tried to guilt her into signing over her portion of the estate. She stayed quiet because she didn't want to be that sister. I wish she had done what you're doing. I'm proud of you." I sat there in my kitchen with the laptop still glowing and let the warmth of those words sink in. I didn't feel like I was the only one carrying the weight. 2 days later, Rudy called. The judge granted a temporary injunction, he said. All disputed funds are to be placed in an escrow account. Your parents can't touch the assets or move anything until this case is fully resolved. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and exhaled. Not because it was over, but because I finally had proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't making it up. that I wasn't being dramatic or difficult or cold. That afternoon, I walked to Blue Wren Cafe. The air was thick with mist, the kind that lingers on your skin but never falls hard enough to feel like rain. I sat at my usual table, the one by the window, and ordered my usual drink. I didn't bring a book. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there, watching the world go by. And when my phone buzzed, I let it. Face up, untouched. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain who I was to anyone. I had spent years trying to be good, trying to be quiet, trying to make everyone else comfortable while shrinking myself into something they could approve of. But I'd already paid the price of silence.
And now?
Now I was finally done paying. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in spirit. The walls were a pale beige, sterile and hushed, as if sound itself had been told to behave. The carpet was thin, the lighting unforgiving. There were no gasps, no outbursts, no made-for-TV drama. Just a room full of people who already knew how this would end, pretending they didn't. My parents sat across the aisle, perfectly still. My mother wore her usual navy dress, paired with a string of pearls that I hadn't seen since my college graduation. She looked almost regal. My father didn't look at me. Not once. He kept his eyes on the table, jaw set, so tight it looked painful. Their lawyer made a short argument about shared familial stewardship and assumed intent. He used words like misunderstanding and context. But it all fell apart the moment the judge held up my grandfather's will, his original, handwritten version. The judge read it aloud, slowly, deliberately. To my granddaughter, Maren Ellison, for her to use with independence and dignity. That was it. Nothing more needed to be said. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was clean, final. The kind of silence that only exists when truth has landed and no one can pretend they didn't hear it. I didn't cry. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, my back straight like Grandpa Walt had taught me when I was 10 years old and wanted to slouch through dinner. My whole body felt like glass, clear, fragile, but unshatterable. The verdict came quickly. They were to return the full amount of the inheritance. All legal fees covered. No further claims would be entertained. I had asked for nothing more than what was mine. As Rudy and I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, the Portland air hit me like a bomb. Gray sky, soft breeze, a few petals from a nearby dogwood tree drifting down, as if even the weather understood something sacred had closed. You didn't just win a case, Rudy said, his voice quiet and firm. You reclaimed your name. And that's when it happened. The tears came, not in a flood, but like rain against the inside of a windshield. Slow. Steady, blurring the edges of everything while the world outside kept moving. I let them fall. I didn't wipe them away. A few days later, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line: You made your choice. I opened it. Of course it was from my mother. You chose money over blood. I hope it keeps you warm. That was it. No apology. No attempt at reconciliation. Just her usual cocktail of self-righteousness and subtle cruelty. I didn't write back. I dragged the email into a folder on my desktop I had titled Things I No Longer Carry. Then I closed my laptop and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was still holding. I used part of the inheritance to buy a small house near Forest Park. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, lots of windows, and a porch that wrapped around like an embrace. The kind of place that makes no promises except peace. It was the first home that felt like mine. With April's help, I turned the spare room into an office and opened a financial counseling service for women who had been where I'd been, divorced, cast out, quietly unraveled by the people who claimed to love them.
We called it Second Nest.
It started small. A few women each month, most of them referrals. But something happened in that little office. They'd come and guarded, used to shrinking. They sat across from me with their folders and their guilt and their decades of exhaustion. But by the second or third meeting, something shifted. They stopped asking how to fix everyone else. They started asking what they deserved. And that question, that quiet revolution, was why I opened the door every day. I didn't go to the next family gathering. I stopped checking the Facebook posts. I didn't pick up when a cousin I hadn't heard from in 10 years decided they suddenly wanted to talk. Because I wasn't in that story anymore. I had written a new one. Some nights, I'd sit in my office after hours with a mug of tea and flip through the old journal I kept through my 20s. The pages were yellowed, edges curled, ink faded in spots. On one page, I had underlined the same phrase over and over. Be the good daughter. It used to feel like a vow. Now it was just ink. One afternoon, without drama, I tore that page out. Not in anger, just with the steady hands of someone who finally understood what wasn't hers to carry anymore. In its place, I taped a fresh piece of paper. Just one sentence. I don't need to prove I'm good. I just need to be whole. People still ask me sometimes, quietly, cautiously, if I regret it, if I miss them, if I do it differently. And I tell them the truth. They took the money. But I kept what mattered, my dignity, my peace, and the right to say no. That, too, is a kind of inheritance. And I will never let anyone take that from me again. Before we close this chapter, I just want to leave you with this. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away from people who hurt you. It's accepting that love shouldn't have to come with conditions. And that choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. Maybe you've lived a story like this. Or maybe someone close to you has. Either way, I hope you know that silence isn't always strength, and that peace doesn't have to be earned through sacrifice. Have you ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, even when it broke your heart? If this story made you feel seen in any way, I'm truly glad you were here. And if you'd like to sit with me for another story next time, I'd love to have you back.